Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people. Today is May 14th, 2025. And as always, I have got a fantastic author for you today. Not only is he an incredible author, but he is also an award-winning director. If you've ever heard of the movie What Still Remains with Mimi Rogers and Jeff Kober, to just name a few of the fantastic actors in this production, you probably already know who our guest is. But we will be getting to that in just a moment. Now, of course, as always, I need to tell you to stick around to the very end because we have got information coming up about Burkhart Books and Book Banter Productions. And I will be telling you about who is going to be our guest next week. So sit back, get comfortable, get that nice little glass of iced tea or ice water or whatever it is that you prefer, and settle in for a fantastic author interview with none other than Josh Mendoza. The way that I always like to start these shows is very simple. I just have my guest tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Perfect. Let's do it. My name is Josh Mendoza, and I am an author and a filmmaker. And my debut novel recently came out, Shadow of the Eternal Watcher, which is a noir detective crime thriller that slams into a big, high-concept space opera adventure in science fiction. And that kind of checks all the boxes of the things I grew up loving, and that was one of the main reasons I wrote it.
So what was one of your favorite things when you were growing up?
Oh, I'd love to say I was reading all the classics, which I did, but honestly, when I was a kid, I was a very big consumer of the expanded universe of Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
I read all those books, but I did read Dune and Fahrenheit 451, and I love all those books as well, Bradbury. And I definitely grew up on a heavy dose of books, and also my dad was a big cinephile, and I watched a lot of movies. So I consumed a lot of stories as a kid.
When did you decide that you wanted to go to college and actually study for this kind of a career?
Yeah, I in high school, I got the bug that I wanted to be a novelist, writer. I think I was taking a junior English class. It was an American literature class. We were in Gatsby and Hemingway and Zora Neale Hurston and all those people. And I just remember we had to write a very creative essay, and I just had a blast doing it. And I thought, I could maybe be an author and write books. I'd always grown up loving it. I was always the kid that I'd go into the bookstore and walk around and be like, okay, well, if I wrote a fiction book, I'd be right here on the shelf next to Herman Melville, and there'd be Mendoza. So I definitely dreamed about it. But I think high school was when I really said, I'm going to try to do that, and went to Stanford, studied creative writing and English, and took a lot of short story classes and the whole nine yards. And actually, when I was in college, I sort of got the filmmaking bug. It never really occurred to me before that people make movies. I just kind of always watched movies, but it's just kind of funny to say, but because I always watched the making of documentaries of all these things, and knew they had 9 cameras or whatever it was shooting on Temple of Doom, and I watched all that on the old VHS tapes. But it was in a college class. It was actually a film noir class, which is fitting because my book has a lot of nods from film noir and those classic detective stories. But I remember watching Citizen Kane, and it was just a very simple moment where they walk up to a pole in what will be the newspaper one day, and we're behind the character. He grabs onto the pole, he spins around the pole, and they match cut on the spin to the front of him. And it was really the first time I'd ever been like, oh, someone moved the camera, someone made that choice. And I started thinking, well, maybe I could be a filmmaker too. So that's where I pivoted into chasing screenwriting. I went to USC, got a master's in filmmaking. I've never looked back with writing and have kept going.
Now, one thing that I'm always kind of curious about, whenever you told your family, I'm going to go to Stanford, I'm going to study writing, I'm going to study filmmaking, how did they feel about that? Did they ever try to tell you, maybe you should do something to fall back on in case that doesn't work?
I was lucky in that sense. I always have had a very supportive family with my parents always telling me to chase my dreams. And later in life, when I met my wife, we met right before I actually went to USC, and I told her I was going to go be a filmmaker. And she's always believed in me and thought it was great that I was chasing this. And that's been very valuable, because whenever you do something creative, you get a lot of no's and you get a lot of rejection, and it can be a long, long road to haul if no one's got your back. So I've always felt blessed in that sense.
That is amazing, because there's been so many authors that I've talked to that their family was all for them doing that, but they also wanted them to study something like accounting or take nursing classes
Mm-hmm.
so that they would have a regular job to fall back on if the creative job didn't work.
For sure. And I do think, obviously that you can say all you want, oh, well, I'm going to do this and will it into existence. But the reality is with film and writing, some of it's luck and some of it's not always based on skill. It can be who you know, like anything in life. So
Hmm.
I do think you have to pay your bills.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have to make sure you can feed your family and pay the bills. But I think you have to live in a reality where you can say, okay, well, I'm also a writer. And if you have a day job, you work the 9 to 5, and you got to time block a couple of times a week to write your 400 or 500 words and get stuff out too. And you just have to always be creating and always be chasing it. And you have to have a real passion for it, I think, because if you get into this stuff because you think you'll be famous or you think you're going to be rich, you might be, but you probably will be disappointed, right? So
Right.
you have to first have the passion and the love for it, and hopefully the riches and the other things come later, right?
Did you have any side jobs while you were studying?
Oh, sure. I worked with my dad for a long time in real estate, and I did that when I was living in LA doing the film thing too. It's a good, flexible job. You can make your own hours, and you work a lot of weekends and a lot of off hours, so you have a lot of time to write too. So it definitely lended itself to that. And I also obviously made movies and got paid doing that too. So it's always kind of been it's very much a gig kind of job, right? Where you're chasing the next opportunity.
So what was the first film that you worked on?
My first feature film came out a few years back. It's called What Still Remains.
Hmm.
And while we were in post on that, I actually had the idea about what became Shadow of the Eternal Watcher. It was I had this idea for what is the first chapter of a detective driving to a job on the streets of LA, to a job he doesn't really want to take. And then I also had this idea of this big space opera adventure. And I was like, well, it'd be fun to mash those up and try to figure out how those two things can exist simultaneously. And I sort of started imagining it as a screenplay. And I just thought, I think realistically, if I made this movie, this would be a couple $100 million movie. It might be a nice piece to pass around to people and show, hey, look, I'm a great writer, but I already had those, right? So
Hmm.
I wanted this to kind of maybe come out, and I wasn't sure it would if I wrote it as a screenplay first. Because a lot of times when you go into meetings too, people will say things like, oh, I like this, but I wish there was intellectual property. I wish there was IP attached to it. So I started thinking, well, what if I got back to my original passion, which was to always be a novelist? And I had always kind of played around with short stories, but hadn't really chased the novel idea. So I was like, I think this could be a great novel, and I can write whatever I want. I can have spaceships and I can blow things up and not have to worry about how much that would cost. And
Yeah.
I just started plugging away at the novel version of it, which, having that background, originally studying to do that one day, and then also the screenwriting background, it all played into it very well, and I think helped create the book that exists now.
Whenever you're writing a screenplay, how is that different from your process when you're writing your novel?
Well, obviously, screenplay is shorter, right? So you have less words on a page. A book, if you write a 300-page book, is like 80,000 words. If you write a 90 to 100-page screenplay, it's probably more like 15 to 20,000 words. So you're talking a fifth to a quarter of a book.
Hmm.
So screenplays are so structured, and so is a book too. But screenplays is very much like on page 15, this should happen. On page 25, you should do this. So I think that structure mindset helped me with the book. I thought about each chapter, sort of how I think about scenes, what's my in, what's my out, and what's my motivation for my character. And if I couldn't answer all those questions, I probably didn't have a chapter. And I think the screenwriting helped with the book too, because I think when you get a book, you're like, oh, I can write whatever I want. I have so much room. But I think that's a trap too, because you can bore people if you're not driving the story forward and you're not driving character forward. So that screenwriting mentality of what's next always helped with the book too.
Well, it's kind of like with a lot of the people that I know who were former journalists and are now writing novels.
Mm-hmm.
Their original work helped them to write tighter and cleaner.
Yeah.
And it sounds like screenwriting did the same thing for you.
Yeah. I think that's true for me. And I always joke too. I mean, you got to write the bad stuff too. So like having written a lot of screenplays and maybe started a few bad novels and now finished them, you get the sense for what works and what doesn't. And the more things you can get feedback on, obviously when you're writing screenplays and you make the movie, you get a lot of notes, you get a lot of thoughts. And that also helped with the book too, is just seeking out people's opinions and hearing them and then translating the notes into something that stays true to what you want to do as the author, right? Because when you get notes, a lot of times people will say, well, what if this happened instead? And you have to kind of block that out, unless it's a brilliant idea and then you can steal it. But I mean, a lot of times they're not brilliant ideas, though. You have to say, well, I hear that there's a problem here. I hear that this chapter is boring them. It's probably too long, whatever the problem is. And you have to identify it as a writer and then address it while staying true to your initial intention as the creator and try to find ways to satisfy both.
How much of yourself do you actually put into your characters?
I think for me, I kind of approach it how I think about, I'm not an actor, I'm a director, but I know how to work with actors. So I always approach my characters how actors a lot of times will approach playing someone. They borrow from their reality, but they're trying to create something new. And I always try to just get into that person's headspace. What would this person do? Not necessarily what I would do. And then sometimes maybe you do the Greek theater thing where some of your secondary characters are maybe you saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. you're doomed, Odysseus, right? Don't do it. But I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of me in everything, but I try to create something new and think outside the box of what I would necessarily do, because Dustin Raines is nothing like me, but I think he's an interesting character and it was an interesting exploration trying to get him from point A to point Z in writing this book too.
Since you are a director and you've worked with so many actors, whenever you're creating new characters, do you visualize them as certain actors that you know and have worked with that fit that image?
Yeah, sometimes you will. I mean, sometimes I have an idea and I'm like, oh, this would be perfect for this person. But, you can't be married to that either, because by the time you get it to come out, that actor may be way too old to play the part, right?
Yeah.
Or you may. So I think it helps to imagine like that. But, because a lot of times you'll go into meetings, it's like, who plays this person? Who plays that person? I have to go back and kind of think about that after the fact. I don't really write like that. And some people do, but I'm not like, all right, this is Denzel Washington, and this is Brad Pitt, and this is Meryl Streep, and I'm never going to get any of them, but that's what I'm thinking. But no, I usually have to go back and be like, okay, what's someone I could actually get who's a good actor who can play this? It's different for every story, I think too. Like sometimes you just have a very clear vision of who they are, and sometimes there's something you've just made up in your mind. And that's what's fun about when you cast a movie too, is people come in and surprise you. And that was true with this book too, when we did the audio book, and I got to listen to a lot of different actors read the different chapters, and they bring their own interpretation to it, and getting to find someone who spoke to me as like what I had imagined, but also maybe did something that excited me and was different. That's what's cool about collaborating and creating.
That's one thing that I don't think a lot of people who aren't authors really think about whenever they're getting an audiobook, how many different narrators that authors have listened to before they chose that one, and the variation that you can get in the performances when you're just listening to somebody read your text is incredible.
Yeah. Well, and this is true when you audition a movie too. I mean, people make choices before they come in because they have to kind of play it a certain way. And you can tell a lot of times the people who have the right instincts and can chase it the right way, and people who maybe don't have already predetermined what it is and just go with that. And
yeah.
You can't over direct people in a movie, right? Like I think a lot of directors think, oh, I'm going to like micromanage this person. You really have to find someone who does 95% of what you want them to do. And then you kind of guide on the day if you want something slightly different to happen, and you're making sure they could go there if you need them to. But if you start giving people very specific, do this, and then turn like this, I mean, sometimes that can work if it's a very specific camera blocking thing. But if you're doing that for every beat, you're not going to get good performances, and people aren't going to be alive in the character either.
Yeah, very true. Now, since you have done some work on movies and you've had your first book published, how much do you think what you learned in college in your classes for this kind of stuff, you still apply to your work that you're doing today?
I think it's all a journey, right? I mean, I always say, I wish I'd known some of the things I know now about like we were talking about word count earlier, and like, because a book is a marathon, right? So it's, how do you break up 80,000 words into achievable goals on the day? And, Stephen King, I think, says he writes 2,000 words a day. And I kind of took that and was like, well, I'm not ever probably going to write I think my best day is 2,000 words. So I'm more of a 500 to 1,000 word a day guy. But I think knowing that you can break it into an achievable goal and say, okay, every time I sit down, I'm going to write 500 words. I'm going to do that 4 times a week. That's 2,000 words. And that gets me a book in 40 weeks, right? And that's less than a year, and you have a book. When I was younger, it was a little more amorphous, and that was something I wish I'd known at the time. With the creative writing stuff, a lot of it is how to take notes, how to listen to collaborators, and that was very true in film school, but also in undergrad as well. And I think that's a valuable skill, because you always get notes, and you're always going to have different people's opinions. And I think the main thing is trying to, I already spoke to this, but stay true to yourself, but also you have to think about what your audience is going to be if you want people to read it too. So yeah, it's all been a journey though. And I think every time I write something or make a movie and it comes out and people have opinions, you're like, oh wow, I'm surprised that's what they're harping on. And you kind of learn from those mistakes and those victories and try to do better the next time.
Yeah, it's always interesting, some of the critiques that you can get in reviews.
Mm-hmm. And I always say too, it's like with the movies, right? I mean, you can't go put like a giant caption on the bottom of your screen that says, hey, by the way, this movie only costs X number of dollars, so don't judge it too hard, right? Or like, on this day, the actor was sick, so it's not good. I mean, you have to, what you put out there is what they have to consume. And the more years that go by, the more media and different books and different TV shows they get to see, and their tastes change. And something that you could have done maybe in 1985 doesn't play anymore, right? And you have to live in that reality as well. But I agree. I mean, reviews are reviews. I mean, you want positive ones, and you will get negative ones. And the book's been interesting because obviously people have to read the book, right? So the book comes out and it takes people different, some people have read it in like a week and they're like, I loved it, here it is. And some people are still working on it. Whereas with a movie, I mean, it's 90 minutes. People watch it right away, right? So you're kind of getting more instantaneous feedback with a movie. And it's definitely a different process with the book. And that's been an interesting ride as well so far.
I know that your book, The Shadow of the Eternal Watcher, is your first book that you've published, but is it the first book that you wrote?
It is the first book I wrote. I've never really tackled a novel before, so this was like we said already, it was getting back to my roots. But I wrote a lot of short stories and then really was focused on screenwriting, and I've written a lot of screenplays. There's only so many that people have heard of, but you write a lot of them, and sometimes someone signs an option on it, it sits on their shelf and it never gets made, and sometimes it just floats around and gets read by a lot of people, and people say they like it and no one buys it, and on to the next one. And you have these calling cards too. So the book was fun because I didn't have to go raise a bunch of money to make it, right? Once it's written,
yeah.
Publishing is a whole nother beast, and it's a challenge, and getting it to this point has been hard work as well. So I don't want people to be like, oh yeah, I'll do that instead, because it'll be so much easier, because it is a challenge to get it to book form as well. But now that it exists, I mean, people can read it, and it started to go into libraries, which is very cool for me as just a fan of seeing it on shelves and seeing it out there for people to be able to get to read it. And people are posting pictures of it on social media, so that's a cool feeling that it's something real, it's something tactile, and it exists.
You seem to have this affinity for post-apocalyptic stories. What is it about that draws you?
Well, the movie's post-apocalyptic but it's like after the apocalypse. I mean, I think the only time that instead of 28 days later, I think 28 years later. So I mean, to me, it was part of that too, was thinking, well, how can I do something that I can do on a budget but looks beautiful? I always tell the story, when I got to film school, I took this class and you were allowed to make whatever you want, 5-minute movie. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do a sci-fi thing. I love sci-fi. And you were only allowed to spend $1,000. And people were like, this is a cool story. It's a cool script. Maybe you should save it for when you can spend more money and do something else. I was like, no. I'm going to will this into being. And, sure enough, it looks like I spent $1,000 on it. What's the spaceship look like? It costs $1,000. Now, it doesn't look very good, but it looks fine, but it's not what you think it's going to be. So I learned that lesson real quick. It's like, well, what can you get for free? And, you go out in the woods and film in the wilderness and things look beautiful. So that was another movie I did that became a script that has done well for me. That's a kind of sort of like Jaws with the bear meets Deliverance. So, I mean, what I tend to do, less post-apocalyptic, I tend to do more genre mashups. So like, I think of What Still Remains as, yes, it's a post-apocalyptic thriller, but it's also a family melodrama / coming of age story for a young girl. And those two things are combined. And that one I just pitched, obviously, it's a monster bear meets Deliverance. And this is obviously a noir detective story meets a big space opera science fiction adventure. So I always try to mash up genres that maybe don't necessarily seem to go together and try to find creative ways to do something different with it and unique.
One of the things that's really great about being an author is you get to do all of the work yourself. I mean, the story is yours. But whenever you're directing somebody else, the story is not just yours, it's also part of the actors. Mm-hmm. Is there anybody that you just absolutely loved, that they really understood what you were doing with that character and they really nailed it?
In my movie?
Yeah.
All my actors, honestly. I mean, Colin and Lulu and Jeff Kober and Mimi Rogers. I mean, I definitely felt very lucky as a first-time director of my feature to have such talented actors, because they really brought the words to life. And when they wanted to change something or wanted to do something different, they had really great instincts and really great ideas. And I always think of myself as like a shepherd, right? You're trying. I know just enough about everything to be dangerous, and then I get people around me who are better at it to do it well. And you get good DPs, and you have your shot list, and you have this massive plan, and then they say on the day, well, what if we put the camera here and put a long lens on, shot through the grass, and went really far away and got her like in a medium shot, and it'll be all out of focus. And you're like, that's brilliant. Let's do that. And that wasn't on the list. And that's why you want to surround yourself with talented people, because there's a lot of creativity that goes into making a movie. And even on a book too. I mean, you get to be the sole arbiter of it at the end of the day, but you want to get beta readers, you want to get people to read it and tell you what they thought of it. And you obviously hopefully get a good editor to come in and who sees what you're trying to do and helps you plus it, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's how I approach everything. Is how can it be a collaboration? How can I make it better through others?
Once you had your book all ready to go, did you go through an agent? Did you try shopping it yourself? How did you get it to market?
I did a little bit of everything. I definitely shopped it myself and took it out to some agents and had people say, oh yeah, we love this. We're going to read it. Give us a few months to read it. And 7 months go by.
Yeah. Now seems like the perfect time for you to give us the actual synopsis of your book.
Yeah. So Shadow the Eternal Watcher. It's a noir detective thriller. It follows Duster Raines. He's just down on his luck, private investigator who gets pulled into a case that he doesn't really want to take, and is trying to make his way in this world that starts to spiral around him into a bigger and bigger science fiction space opera. So I think it's fun because it's first person. We follow him, and we sort of discover this science fiction world with him. It starts out with him very like by the book detective, working the streets of LA, like a lot of movies or books you've read or seen. So for me, it was just, how do you make that very tight, character-driven story eventually reach this big space opera at the end? So that was kind of the puzzle of writing it. So it's a fun adventure. I wanted to write something that was like an elevated page turner is how I always thought about it. So I think that's what I pulled off too. And it's just a fun journey.
Now, do you intend for this just to be a one-off, or is there a possibility that this could become a series with this character?
Yeah, I definitely wrote it that it could be a series. The book stands alone, but it has an ending that leads into another one, and I am working on a second book right now. So my intention is for there to be more of these stories with him, and kind of a contain maybe a duology, but probably a trilogy of books is sort of what I'm thinking. We'll see what happens.
I don't know why. I always think a duology leaves me wanting more. I don't know why. I think we're always so set on trilogies
I
that has
know,
become
right?
such a standard that whenever somebody does two, I'm always like, okay, where's the third one? I want the third one.
Yeah. And that's how I feel too. I mean, I definitely, when I wrote this, I'm like, all right, there's three of them, but we'll see what happens. But I definitely have this second one in mind, and it will lead into a third one. And then we'll see what the second one becomes, because they change as you go too. You
Mhm.
set a plan and then you let your characters do what they're going to do. And it definitely morphs and changes as it goes.
Are you a serious plotter or do you have a skeleton of it? And then you
Hmm.
let the characters kind of lead you along the way as well.
Yeah, that's what I do. I mean, I'm not a big over planner. I plan it to a certain point. I outline a little bit. If you read my outlines, you wouldn't be able to write a book off of it, but it makes sense to me. Um, but I'm not one of I know people who will write a script, their outline will be 75 pages and the script ends up being 90, right? So I'm not that guy. I'm definitely more of I guess, what we call a pantser, and I find it as I go for sure.
There was one author that I had interviewed, and she was telling me that her outline was almost as long as her book, and I could not even
Yeah.
begin to imagine that. I'm like, how? What on earth did you have in there? I mean, that's just another book.
I know exactly. I definitely have broad strokes. To me, too, I think people overplan sometimes, and whatever works for you. I think what gets you to the finish line, that what works for someone doesn't work for someone else. But to me, it's, can I get words on a page and then go back and fix them? Because I would rather have something that's like, this is an okay thing, and then I can make it good or great, versus staring at the blank page, thinking, all right, what's my outline say? What am I doing? And being lost in that over planning. Because I think sometimes too, when I zone in on something, I always call it the muse, right? Like where I'll zone out and suddenly I'll have that 2,000 word day, and you go
Mhm.
back and start reading it, and you don't even remember where some of it came from. So I think that's where some of the magic can happen too. And your characters can surprise you when you let them sort of do what they would do, not necessarily what you plan for them to do.
And that's one of the best things about getting to talk to all these different authors in this podcast is there are so many different variations on how to produce the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible the things that people bring to it and what they can make out of their stories from all of these different points of view and practices and the way that they plot or don't plot. It's amazing.
It really is.
I mean, I will always be interested in people telling me how they do it.
Yeah, and I was definitely, when I was younger, one of the guys that's like, oh, I don't want to read that book on how to write. I know how to, like, I have my own process. But I think it's important when people ask me for advice now, I say, go learn those things from those books so that you know the rules so you can break them.
Exactly.
And that's where I've gotten to eventually. But I think a younger me was sort of, I think a lot of people get like this too. Oh, I don't want someone to tell me how to do something. I'm creative. I'm going to find it on my own. But I think, like you spoke to it, you feel like you want a trilogy. Well, that's probably because most stories happen in 3 acts, or
Hmm.
plays happen in 5 acts, right? Like there are these structures that every story boils down to at the end of the day, and knowing what they are can help you kind of bend them and break them and do unique things, and hopefully add to the growing lexicon, right? And expand it.
And now is like the perfect time to do our 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick, but I just can't stop doing it.
I love it.
Are you
All
ready?
right, I'm ready.
Okay, and these are just like little nonsense questions just to help people identify with you on a personal level.
Perfect.
So, question one. I know that you spend time between Arizona and LA,
Mm-hmm.
but if you had to choose one place to live, which one would you go, or would you pick a third place?
Hmm. I love Arizona because my family loves it. My kids really love being by their grandparents and love the slower suburban life. LA was great when I was younger with my wife and we didn't have kids, and you got to go to a lot of these events. But as we got older and we were raising kids, we found, oh, well, we're not really going to any of those fun things anymore. But I mean, LA's like any big city. It's amazing to get to go to movie premieres and these different
Mhm.
events that only happen there, right? They don't happen anywhere else. So I think my heart is in two places. And as another place, I went to Stanford, and when I was a young man, I came from Arizona, and I felt like I'd died and gone to the rainforest heaven. I'd never seen so much green in my life. So I have a special place in my heart for Northern California too. And I'm sure the Pacific Northwest fits that bill as well.
I just keep thinking, okay, I've been to LA once and I've been to Arizona once. The traffic is what would settle it for me.
And not to be cliche, but the traffic definitely is. But Phoenix keeps growing too, and there's a lot of traffic here too. So I go back and forth a lot. There's no lacking for traffic in LA though, and the jokes when you watch SNL and they talk about the different freeways. I mean, that's basically what everyone talks about. Arizona, everyone talks about how hot it is in the summer,
Yeah.
and in LA, everyone talks about how bad the traffic is.
But it's a dry heat.
Yeah. My main thing is just I don't ever want snow. I'm a desert guy, and then I got my California sun, and I never wanted to have to shovel snow. So if I can avoid that, I'm probably happy.
Yeah, I'm not fond of the cold. I would much rather have Arizona.
Yeah, that's how I am too.
So, question two, what is your favorite family vacation destination?
You know, I have two kids, 10 and 8, and we love going to Disneyland. And we like dressing up and getting in our different Disney apparel. And the kids are planning princess and Jedi outfits when we go this year. So that's always our go-to. And outside of that, growing up in Arizona, every summer we went to San Diego because that's what Arizonans do. So I spent a lot of time at the Dell when I was a kid on Coronado Island, and it has a special place in my heart there too.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever go to Disneyland too much.
No, we love Disneyland.
You know, 2 years ago, my husband and I went. That was the first time he had ever been to a Disney park.
Did he like it?
He loved it. We did
Oh,
everything. We
good.
got all the
Not
photos. We got tons of souvenirs. We even went and
That's
got our
awesome.
faces painted.
Sometimes when adults go and they haven't gone before, they don't like it. But I'm a big kid at heart, so it's fun for me. And then getting to see my kids have their own memories and experiences is what it's all about, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's fun. You just got to go have
Yeah,
fun.
exactly.
So question three, what is one of your guilty pleasures?
Oh, guilty pleasure is probably my caffeine intake. I'm a sucker for cold brew, and I buy it bulk. I get a lot of chameleon cold brew at the store and stock my fridge up with it and drink too much of it.
Oh yeah, I definitely run on caffeine here.
Yeah, caffeine in the day and wine at night. That's kind of my cliche writer journey.
My husband actually made friends with a guy who is from Italy. He lives here in our town in Germany now, and he owns a bean roastery.
Oh, that's fun.
Yes, we really like our friend.
That's awesome.
So question four. This is a very random question, but I was talking to somebody else and it came up. And so now I'm kind of curious. Do you know how to drive a stick shift?
I mean, I know technically how to drive a stick shift.
But have you ever done it?
I've never actually driven a stick shift, and no one can tell on this podcast. I'm a 6'9" man too, so
Oh,
getting that extra pedal in there doesn't do me any favors either. No, I'd be the guy on Amazing Race who'd be like ripping the gears apart. We'd be like in first gear driving down the freeway trying to get to our destination.
well, it was one of those things. I grew up in farm country, and the first thing I ever learned how to drive was a tractor.
Hmm.
So I'm very used to driving stick shift, and I've just been really surprised lately. I've been talking to a couple of people, and it's amazing how many people have never tried to do it.
I know the theory behind it, but I've never even I don't think I've ever even sat in the driver's seat of a car that needs to be shifted.
Wow, I think like my first four cars were manual.
Yeah.
I just find that interesting.
I'm a product of my time, I suppose, but I, I miss my I guess I miss my VHS DVDs and CDs though. Every generation it passes away, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with people in farm country tend to have
Hmm.
manual transmissions more often.
Yeah, you gotta get that tractor going, right? In the truck.
Exactly. So now this is a question that I'm asking everybody this season. For question five, What is your favorite author that you always recommend to a friend when they're looking for somebody new to read?
Oh goodness. Well, I have a few go-tos. I always change those too. I'll preface it with that. But who I've read recently, who I love, I've been really into Rob Hart, who wrote The Paradox Hotel and The Warehouse. I thought The Warehouse was a great book. And I read N.K. Jemison's The Broken Earth trilogy about 5 or 6 years ago, and I just adore those books, and I think that everyone should read those.
Well, and part of the reason why I asked this too is I've started putting um, reader suggestions in my newsletter whenever I'm advertising the new podcast that's been broadcast for the week. And so a lot of times I'll put these authors for that recommendation that week
Yeah,
from the author that I interviewed.
I think that's what it's all about, right? And I was saying to my wife, I mean, that's why you keep talking about your writing to people too, because you never know who's going to be your advocate, right? Like Rob Hart doesn't know me, he doesn't know who I am, and I'm out there. I'm like one of his biggest cheerleaders, and N.K. Jemisin too. I'm one of her biggest cheerleaders, and you never know whose work's gonna speak to you. And I think that's what's cool about books too. Is there's so many books and there's so many different viewpoints to find out there and get into different headspaces.
And for the most part, the writing community is extremely supportive of each other. People read each other's works, they give
Yeah,
critiques, they help people find agents and they help people find good marketers. And it's really incredible how much people network within the community.
for sure. Yeah, it's not too cutthroat in the writing community, and it's just I think some of that probably comes from it is a lonely job sometimes, and it's also a struggle, right?
Hmm.
Like we spoke of at the beginning with the rejection and the because no matter how good you are, you're going to get some no's. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
think everyone relates to that and wants to see people succeed when they believe in them too.
Yeah, definitely. What has been the hardest part for you during the marketing of this book?
It's just, I mean, sometimes you feel like you're talking about it too much and you have to sort of throw that out the window and not be humble. No
Yeah.
one, I always tell people too, like people talk about, it's true of movies as well. There's just so much out there now. I mean, there's been a democratization of being able to do things, which is great with cheaper equipment. And I think obviously books, I mean, with the internet, advice is a lot more readily available. How do I query someone? It's a lot easier than it was probably 25 years ago when you had to actually put it in the mail, right?
Hmm.
And that's great, but it's also troublesome because not everything is of equal skill level, but you get lost in these slush piles, right? Like,
Yeah.
and finding a way to shine and stand out can be more difficult when there's a lot more things out there to compete with. So you just have to just keep telling people about it. And you never know who's listening right now, right? And you never know what person is going to become that cheerleader I mentioned earlier, goes out and tells a million people about your work too. So you just have to keep telling people, and hopefully what you wrote speaks to people.
Whenever I talk to somebody that has like a large catalog of books that they have several series, we always try and at least mention their other work because it's always there and it's always available. And the person that's listening to that podcast may not have heard of their other books.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that they know that they have more than just that one thing out so that they will go and look at all of it. Because as long as your book is being published, you can always advertise it because you're going to hit somebody new every
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah, and I think that's what's cool, and that's why I'm excited to get the second one out there too. And I'm working on it because I think you're right. It kind of lives, and I saw that with my movie too. It's amazing how many people have watched that movie, and it never ceases to surprise me.
Yeah.
Like, and it was really big in the Philippines. You're like, really? Okay, cool, that's fun. I actually was on a call with someone the other day for something else. They were in the Philippines and they mentioned my movie and they're like, "Oh, I loved that movie. I saw it." And I was like, it's a cool feeling
Yeah.
because you make these things to reach people, and at least I do. I mean, I don't write for myself. I'm writing. I mean, I write a story I would want to read first, but I'm writing that because I want to reach an audience, and I feel like I have something worth saying for people to hear too.
Hmm.
And I think that it's exciting when it gets in people's hands and it does speak to them. And like we said earlier, sometimes it speaks to them in different ways than you anticipated, but that's cool too.
Oh, definitely. Sometimes I think it's almost better whenever they tell you that it touched them in a way that you never even imagined.
Mm-hmm. And again, I mean, hold on to the positivity too, because it goes both ways. And
Yeah.
I think we as a society and tend to latch onto the negative, but the positive is more valid in my opinion than the negative, but it's easier to be negative in our world. So
Yeah, unfortunately.
yeah,
But we are going to end on a very positive note.
let's
Why
do
don't you
it.
remind everybody who you are and where they can go buy your book?
Yeah. My name is Josh Mendoza, and I'm the author of Shadow of the Eternal Watcher, a noir detective science fiction thriller. And you can get this book wherever you like to get your books. It's you can go into your indie bookstore and tell them to order it for you, but it's also on Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble, and like we said earlier, there's an audiobook. It's on Audible. It's on all the different places you get your audiobook. So really, wherever you can think of to order it from, you can get it.
And I do have to send out a little thank you to Wes at PR by the Book for bringing you to my attention. Say,
Thanks,
I
Wes.
love everybody at PR by the Book because they send me some of the best authors.
Until today. No, Wes is great, and I feel the same way. It's cool to get out and talk to these different people who love books and have a passion for it. And I've really enjoyed being on your show today.
So, and I love them because they're really good about getting back in touch with me when I forget to answer their emails. They know I'm forgetful and they don't drop me. They just remind me again. It's like, thank you.
Exactly. Where's that link again? How are we going to talk to each other?
So yeah, I love them.
That's great.
Thank you so much
Oh,
for being on this podcast today. This has been absolutely wonderful, and you are a fantastic guest.
oh well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing it out there in the void, like we say, shouting into it.
And as always, your information will be available in the description of today's podcast with live links to go find your books and your social media, as well as on our website at burkhartbooks.com.
Well, thanks so much, Dianne. I really enjoy it.
So there you have it, folks. My interview with the incredible Josh Mendoza. Be sure to check out your favorite streaming service for his movie, What Still Remains. I know for certain it is available on Amazon Prime, and I think it might be available on Netflix and Apple TV, but since I live in Germany, it's hard for me to check those things in the United States and other countries because they often have different movies available depending on where you live. So I can't check that out for all of you. But go check it out for yourselves because you do not want to miss this movie. And after you've checked out his movie, be sure to hop on your favorite book-selling site and get his debut novel, Shadow of the Eternal Watcher. I don't know about you, but that sounds like a fantastic weekend. A great book and a great movie, all from one great writer. Now, next week, we have Chaplain Patrick Day, and we'll be discussing his book, Finding the Safest Place on Earth. Chaplain Day has ministered to hundreds of people over the years who are dealing with addiction, and this book was born from those experiences. We're going to be talking about his work and his writing and so much more. Now, if you happen to follow me on Facebook, you have probably seen that I've been changing up my promo images. I recently managed to finally get some new headshots, and I'm updating everything with current photos of myself. And it's been a really fun experience playing with all of these things. I love Canva. Canva is like the best thing that I've come across in a long time for doing quick graphics that look great and just makes it so easy to put this stuff together. But I have new photos going up for my profile photos, the headers. You're going to be seeing the new photos across all of our social media. Hopefully, we're going to be able to finally put together the cover of my book that I'm working on, Free Bad Haircut with Each Craniotomy. We've just been waiting for some fantastic weather to go out and get some new photographs. So keep watching all of our social media. Hopefully, I'm going to be able to do a cover reveal for all of you. Finally, I know I've been talking about it for quite a while. In the meantime, you can always go to Amazon and check out my book series that I wrote as Stephen Burkhart, the Into the West Saga serial. It is a historical fiction cliffhanger serial that is set in the United States, pre-Civil War era, and you don't have to worry about it being a cliffhanger because all of the books in that serial are out. So you can go one to the other and not have to wonder how that cliffhanger gets resolved. And I promise you, the very last book in the serial wraps up the entire saga in a nice, neat little bow with no cliffhangers. I don't leave you hanging at all. It is a very satisfying ending to this family saga. And now I think that's probably enough for today, folks. There are more things coming, and we're doing things behind the scenes to try and get you more fantastic author content, but we'll save that for another day. For now, I hope the weather is just as fabulous wherever you are as it is for us here today in Germany. So you know what time it is, folks. It's time for you all to go forth. Enjoy some fantastic weather wherever you are, and be really happy.